Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to our weekly review series on WandaVision. This is, of course, the first MCU series on Disney Plus, and we're up to episode 5 on this thing of 9. So, won't spend it quite close to the end yet, but there is a huge revelation at the end of this episode, and we are going to be talking about it. So, as they now have episode names, we're on episode 5 on a very special episode. And as always, every week to week, we are going through complete spoilers on this episode. Now, if you haven't seen this episode, don't watch this show. There is a huge revelation, as I mentioned at the end of this episode. And yeah, I mean, we were talking about it just before we went live, in that even Disney themselves are pretty fast and loose in terms of the spoilers, like giving away this thing. But this is massive. We've got a lot to talk about. It's going to be a really fun discussion. And obviously, if you have seen the episode, in the comments, do comment along with us as well.
Definitely, guys. And as we always say, we want you guys to comment along with us. So, especially for today, because not to get into it, but the ramifications of today's episode is not what I expected on a Friday afternoon viewing. We want you to comment along with all of your thoughts on today's episode. We're going to go through key bits. We're not going to be as sort of specific as we normally are, because there are some great moments, but the key is truly the final 30 seconds and what's teased before it. So we want you guys to comment along if you do enjoy this, if you like the speculation, if I like our WandaVision coverage, then do subscribe to us. We've got plenty of other WandaVision videos, and we've got a lot more Marvel stuff coming up, including Loki and, of course, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Other way around, though, wrong order. But anyway, if you want to find out when we're going to be live, what videos we're doing, get us on our social media. That is Facebook, Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy, and we have a link to the TeePublic in the description below. And for you guys that don't just like Marvel, that do like other film stuff, we've got some pretty big reviews coming out over the next couple of weeks. We've got Tom Hanks' new film, News of the World, out tomorrow. We've got Judas and the Black Messiah coming Wednesday, we believe, and there will be a Pele film, his new documentary, out in a couple of weeks. So we've actually got some new releases coming up, which we're excited to talk about, but unfortunately not as excited to talk about as this episode, because this is game-changing. But before we get into what was game-changing, what is game-changing, we're going to talk about a smaller change that took place, the era change. And I'm going to hand over to Chris, because we hit the beloved 80s, but not in the way we thought at the moment.
Yeah, so we knew that this was coming from the trailers, and there's actually, we're assuming another episode set in the 80s, which we haven't got yet, which will probably be next week's episode, which is the Halloween one. You see them in like the original costumes from the comic book, but it's nice to finally get to the 80s again, and the opening intro to this episode, as they always have a sitcom opening and done in the style of whichever decade they're emulating, and that got a lot of laughs out of me, and I thought that was quite effective at the beginning. But yeah, it's not in your face 80s. They do have like an exercise, jazzercise kind of moment in the episode, like the whole leg warmer type thing, which is very much 80s. If you're doing anything modern that's riffing on that, chances are you'll probably have something to do with like gym equipment or exercising, and you get that in there. But yeah, they didn't sort of like really make it, known that it's the 80s. You can clearly tell, but it's not like, shoved down your faces or anything, shoved down your throats. So I thought it was really good, and it's nice to get that progression. And I'm assuming we're going to get 2 set in the 80s, and then we'll probably move to the 90s afterwards. But in terms of the structure of this thing, I mean, you predicted it last week. We were talking about, after last week's episode, we thought the whole entire show had changed forever. We were talking about the Dark Knight quote beforehand. And the ending of this episode does that again. So it's sustaining that mystery from episode to episode. But you predicted it in terms of the structure. We were thinking, is it just going to go back to the sitcom structure and kind of stay at that for a while? We had our episode outside in the regular world and the mystery, and sort of like tying up a few loose ends and answering a few questions out there. Then is it going to go back to normal and follow the same structure as we had for the first half? And not really. It does intercut, and you get that aspect ratio change again, like we thought it might. So you called it. It is going to flip-flop back between what's going on in the sitcom and the outside world, and I quite like that now. I'd say that you probably don't get as immersed in the episode as the first few, in terms of that decade that it's emulating, but that's the whole point of it. The reality is starting to crack. The threads are starting to show. The people on the outside know that something's not right, and even Wanda herself. There are more moments probably in this episode, out of all the episodes, where the reality starts to break down, and people are starting to wise up in the world that it's all an illusion, especially with Vision as well.
Yeah, and I think this was the big thing coming into this, that was a question a lot of people had. We had a whole episode last week in the not modern day, in reality, and we kind of had that discussion. Would it be weird if they did another 2 in the 80s and went back to reality, or are they going to be able to edit it, mix and match it? And I thought, to be fair to the editors, it felt like natural breaks in between when we had the sitcom vibes, when we had reality, when we were jumping back and forth. I thought they handled that a lot better than I was originally thinking they could. And I think they seem to have done it at a point where there would have been an advert. And I think that was the balance, was those specific points in time came. And it was fascinating to get that, because the audience, you treat this as an episodic thing, treat this as everyone is up to episodes 4. They're not dumb. We now know that something is going on, so you don't have to hide it as well. Whereas if you have episode 1 and you'd have cut to the characters rocking up outside, that would have been really sort of jarring. Whereas because you had the intrigue of episode 1 and 2, the little tidbits here and there of some weird stuff, and I know some people didn't like that, but I think that's actually lended itself more a favor as a weekly summary to knowing, okay, this is happening here, and then now we're fully in the present, we're in a current timeline. The balances was great between one another, and I think that was the key for this. As you said with the 80s stuff, it's such a not important decade, because obviously it is, but it didn't feel as if, because we had the 50s, the 60s, the 70s all in a row, because we had those natural breaks, it didn't feel as forced. Not to compare it to another recent thing set in the 80s, it didn't have the forced imagery. Now, the closest thing we have are the gym clothes, which I don't mind, but there was no "we must go to the mall." There was none of that. This is an 80s home. I've forgotten the name of the sitcom that it was imitating. Apologies, I saw it on Twitter earlier. It's like the intro is like a drawing coming together. I think it's got family or time in the title, something like that. But I thought it was handled well. And you know what I will say, and me and you both predicted this, the actual sitcom jokes worked. Didn't find it really funny in episodes 1 and 2, and we both kind of said, is it the era that it was different humor back then? Are we going to sort of follow it, find it as funny? But some of the jokes in this, like, email, some of them are cheesy, some of them are bad, but I think they had enough to work as a sitcom that you would expect from that time. And I thought that was pretty great. And when they did have the really sitcom scenes with Vision, at the same times, we had him tapping into the reality of what's going on outside, which I think made it all the more interesting.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I've mentioned that in all the episodes that we've reviewed so far, those moments where the reality breaks, or there's a glitch, or there's a rewind, or there's a really uncomfortable, unnatural moment, have always been my favorite bits, because it is really genuinely unsettling. And I want to say the moment with Vision where I always forget her name, I always forget the actress's name, the next door neighbor comes round and she says, like, do you want me to take that line again? Do you want to take it from the top? But they really doubled down, and they just dragged that out, and it got so uncomfortable.
The crying stops as well with the babies, so something's happening, and
it was just the silence. And usually it's just like a line like, "What was that one?" That like rewind, oh, nothing, and it will carry on. But this seemed to just dwell on it for a scene. And obviously, when Vision does go to his workplace, it stayed with him, and he's trying to deconstruct it more. And he has the moment where he goes to his colleague and taps into his mind, and there's this guy just going crazy, like, it hurts, she's in my mind, like, please help me. And then so I love the Vision stuff more in this, and especially when he confronts her at the end. And I know I'm sort of jumping around all the episode, but I love that Vision is starting to become self-aware. I mean, he is naturally, the character himself, a self-aware artificial intelligence, but now he's almost becoming self-aware in this reality, which I find quite interesting, especially if the character is dead. And I guess, we can go into debate with this, whether we think that he is still actually dead and he's a corpse, or if somehow Wanda has actually brought him back to life, because we kind of get an answer to that as well on the outside.
Yeah, the Vision stuff was great, and I think a scene that really, before we get to the sort of the breaking scene, what really did it was when Vision was talking, and he says, I mean, I think it's right at the end, actually, I feel bad, Jim, that he's like, I don't remember anything before being here. And it's kind of like, oh, we all know you're dead. So there's going to be a scene at some point, and you know what? I think it's going to get me when the scene comes where he gets faced with either going back to his real state, which is something else entirely, or there's just going to be, I think, off a side point, Infinity War, the music in the scene where Wanda has to kill him, that sort of 5-minute sequence is one of the best scenes in the entire MCU. The music, all of it, and obviously then Thanos does that sort of 180-degree slap. Obviously, click the fingers, we're all done here. But the Vision stuff's great. With Norm as well, the guy, like, it's the screaming, and what I really lived off the side of that is when we were cutting back to the offices, you have the human side of it, and it's that guy like, well, she's a terrorist, like she's not. And obviously we're here to play the sympathy thing, and that is actually probably my least favorite moment of the entire episode of a cliff point is she's a terrorist, she killed people in Civil War, and he's like, yeah, but she's not. Then she joined the Avengers and she's all good, and he's like, but she is a terrorist. And to me, that's forcing a boring, easy 2-dimensional military villain. Now, whether they're going to do something smart with that is another conversation. But then we got, I guess, the big revelation was this happened 9 days ago, they said. So
they put it into context. Because I remember last week I was saying that the week breaks between episodes kind of put you in context of the universe. Like there could be many more episodes. I guess not, because it's taken place over the course of 9 days. So.
It's like an episode a day, and
yeah,
it shows her breaking in to go, so here's this footage of her stealing Vision's body. And I was like, like nods head. She is puppeteering. Well, at this moment, we're not sure how, but that is his dead body. And what fascinated me more than anything, actually, was we didn't get to see the dead body. We see her going to like a scientific room. Now, we can't really talk about WandaVision without dropping a theory. One of my friends texted me a really cool one, which I don't think is true, but apparently it's getting a bit of steam. So I'll say that in a moment, because I don't know if you've heard that either. But I think they were experimenting on Vision's dead body to try and weaponize it, because it's that very typical, boring, he's breaking into a secret facility and there's loads of scientists and the camera's cut out around him. And then in that same scene, they speak about, Vision wouldn't want to be alive. He wouldn't want to be weaponized. And they're like, the military 2-dimensional guy is saying that because plot twist, I'm going to guess they're trying to weaponize Vision, and she's gone in and took the body and made sure that can't happen. That's one theory I've got right now. I'm going to read out the theory that my friend texted me because it's unfair if I don't. So, Chris, you're a massive Age of Ultron fan. Sorry. So I was said, have you heard the Ultron theory? And I was like, what? So they believe, if you look at, I don't know if you've seen this or I sent this to you, the credits on the last 4 episodes, it comes into Vision's eye, or it comes out of Vision's eye. Now, if you look at the shapes and the blocks of the coming out of the eyes, these are the same shapes, blocks, and colors as when Ultron goes inside Jarvis and took him over in Age of Ultron. And if you go back to Age of Ultron, they also said that he would always be a vessel into Vision, because we all know Vision was originally going to be Ultron's final stage body. So there's a mini theory happening that Ultron is Vision. I don't think it's true.
So he's going to start talking with James Spader's voice at the end.
Well, this is what I was like. Or this is what I'm thinking. Or where the scientists trying to make Ultron, but we don't need an Ultron version 2. The story has been told, and Age of Ultron's got a very different reaction amongst people. I like just hearing these theories, these mad things, because it just gives you something to think about. The fact that you can draw theories out of the opening visual effects on a credit scene is beautiful.
So they're the hardcore fans, like the hardcore, the ones that frame by frame pause. Dave Live with Brian in the comments says, and the W didn't stand for weapon before Monica was blipped. I don't know what. So yeah, maybe. I don't know if I'd like Ultron back. I'd like them to move into new territory. I don't want them to go back and just resurrect that whole thing, because then basically you're just doing exactly the same thing as the end of Age of Ultron. Like, you killed my brother. Or did you? We'll talk about that at the very end of the episode. But I want them to move into new territory. I don't want it to be that. I kind of just like the idea that, maybe they were experimenting on it because, it's dodgy, shady military guys. It's what they do in Marvel films and comic book films, or any film, really, any sci-fi film. So I'd rather it be that than just resurrecting a villain that we know, and just have it be a way that Wanda's dealing with basically just death, the way that she's dealing with it. And I think that I got more of a theme from this episode, probably more than I did the other ones, because especially with how it ties to the sitcom story. Because with the sitcom story, you're having the kids who are like aging up and they adopt a dog. And the dog dies by the end of the episode, and she kind of gives this speech to her kids of, death is just a natural part of life and we have to accept it. And we're seeing her doing exactly the polar opposite of that within the world. So I liked that connection between, because that's been my problem, is always like, why a sitcom? Why choose that as the vessel to make your fantasy world? Because Wanda, as far as we know, I said this last week, isn't a fan of sitcoms as far as we know. Chances are she probably never really watched much TV, or especially watched this kind of TV. So why is that and that style so personal to her? And we still don't really have an answer for that, but the other episodes seemed like they just did it in terms of like a style standpoint, like, oh, well, it's a sitcom show, we've got to do a sitcom part of the episode. But this one actually fed into the themes of the things that are going on with her character more so than all the other episodes, I thought, with that aspect of death. And we have that with, she's basically lost all of her family. She lost her brother in Age of Ultron. She lost the love of her life with Vision in Infinity War, and then rewound time and then watched it a second time. So I quite like that aspect to it. And I think that that's probably, it's difficult to rank the episodes. Maybe we can rank them when we get to the end, although I do kind of see it as a complete story. But maybe it's a toss-up between last week's and this week's. But I like this one as a whole more, because it really does feel like we're advancing the story, with Vision becoming more self-aware, and that doubt and that mental sort of break that we're getting with Wanda as well.
Yeah, and that's what I thought with it. And I think with the Wanda stuff, another thing worth mentioning is we get the scene of her leaving the sitcom, coming to reality, which is a terrifying scene. I mean, we all, not the strongest Avenger debate, but these guys have an in-house discussion. Now, I don't know my thoughts on this, because without getting into viewings of the film, actually, Life Brian Dave dropped me a message earlier. We were chatting. He said that the fact that the individuals in that boardroom knew Wanda was fighting Thanos and would have won until missiles came, and in fact the other one knew that Captain Marvel was fighting him into the Stone Hitter. Now, I'm not saying that took me out of reality, but now I think, but it's like, yeah, like these guys have like a Zoom, like a drone just recording the Thanos fight for the worlds. And it was now I've thought about that. It's a bit too honest. I got the point of it. Clearly, the whole point of that moment was for Monica Rambeau to get the reference to Captain Marvel, that she was a part of that, she knew her, and the fact that we know she's going to be in Captain Marvel 2 and in the Miss Marvel TV series. So I think she's being set up as quite an important character down the line, which we've got no issue with. It just felt very random in that scene.
I doubt there was some kind of mission briefing after Endgame where all the Avengers are sat around a circular table with them. It's like, right, tell us what happened. Well, then Captain Marvel flew in, and then she got punched in the face by Thanos, and then Scarlet Witch did this cool. You know what I mean? It's
There has been discussions and many jokes in the past. There is one character the world would like to recite the story of the Avengers Endgame, and I've forgotten the actor's name from Ant-Man who tells the stories.
I
always get the actor's name mixed up, but people have joked for years saying that if anyone's going to ever recap the MCU, it should be him. I could see it maybe as like an online joke, not as an actual in-house edited scene.
Michael Pena.
That's it. If anyone could recite it, it has to be him. That would work, but it would be pointless. It's over the top. But it was one of those episodes. And again, when she came out, you can hear a bit of the accent returned as well. We've had that discussion too. You get the tint of the Russian, which I love that she's going for the overly American accent for the sitcom.
Yeah,
and then we're getting the reality kind of Sokovian. I guess it's a fictional country, so I don't really say fictional accent. But that moment, when you think of horror shows, when you think of things that are too dark for TV and all that kind of stuff, when every single gun turned on. That was cool. Mission director, because you had the lasers, and I was like, is this show about to become like not R-rated, because it wouldn't, but I was like, are they going to do this? Is she going to walk off and we're just going to hear like a firing squad?
I thought that would have been cool if they'd have done that.
I think it would have been too deep for her as a villain, because we don't know how she's going to come out of this show. She might come out of the show a villain and be the ultimate villain for Phase 4, who knows? But I loved that scene. I thought that was great. It showed fear from the others. It showed her powers. And I just loved her coming out of like the wall. Like you had like the red lightning almost, and it opening up for her to come out. All that stuff was great. And again, that came down to the editing, that they put the right bit in the sitcom of, oh, what's that noise outside? Family run outside. And all those little things clicked with it. And I think it made it work. And it was just really good fun to watch. I think with that, I'm just trying to think before we get to the big.
Well, I think for me, just sort of like jumping off that point, is that I think this episode more than any, because I guess it's always sort of been at the back of my mind, but I've never sort of like ranked all the Avengers. This one kind of cemented to me that yeah, she probably is the strongest Avenger. Like she can probably do anything. She can change, bend, and alter realities. And I know you like Doctor Strange can as well, but when they said like yeah, she almost took down Thanos, I was like, did she? I was like, yeah, I guess she probably could have done. Yeah. So, and then they have that argument as well, which I thought was hilarious, where there's just like, oh, well, Captain Marvel got close. I'm like, nah, she didn't. She got 1 inch punched in the face by Thanos. Like, boom, she's out of it. Like, get her out of the fight. Just, no. That's where I've talked about this before, but with Endgame, when she flew in, that's what I thought they were going to do. I thought she was going to like the Eagles in Lord of the Rings, like just turn the tide instantly with it. Like, thank God they didn't do that. But yeah, and the bit where she does turn all the guns, I do like that she went back to the accent, and I couldn't remember if she did still kind of have that accent in Infinity War and Endgame. I know we went looking for it, didn't we, when we had the whole accent debate with Elizabeth Olsen, but I think her she's a great actress anyway, but I think this episode definitely where she's getting more of those emotional moments, and she's absolutely tremendous. And like her back and forth with Paul Bettany as well. I think we got more of that in this episode, maybe than other times. And we saw like a different dynamic to it, a more sort of argumentative, sort of like desperate back and forth between the two. And I guess before we talk about the ending, one of my favorite scenes is I talked about the one earlier where they really dwelt on that uncomfortable sort of like, you know, breakdown of reality towards the beginning. I love the bit where they started arguing and he demanded answers, and it was like the credits of the TV show, and it was like this really happy music juxtaposed with the situation as it was still playing out beforehand. I thought that was fantastic how they did that.
I love that. I think that scene's the ending. So before I give my thoughts on that, I want to talk about the advert, because we got the return of the adverts.
Yeah.
Now, Lagos, I loved. So the Lagos MCU connection is the part of Africa at the beginning of Civil War where she sends the fire. Well, she basically blows up the building by mistake with all the people in it. So that's the Lagos reference. I can't remember what they wrote, but the fact it was about cleaning up messes and she
just get rid of it. And yeah,
I thought that was a really dark, as Carl said, a dark undertone. I loved that. But no, that Paul Bettany. I mean, I'm not going to jump the gun. I'm not going to say I know Emmy history and all that nonsense, but I would guarantee you Paul Bettany is on track for an Emmy nomination for playing a red man in a miniseries, because when he started kicking off, I was like, something is going to happen. Those credits have hit far too early. The credits are 7 minutes long, not 12. That was question number one. And then you knew that, okay, this is intentional rolling of because we've not really had the outright credits before. And it's when he's sort of shouting and they go through the door. I was like, oh, okay, something's happening here. And they kind of have it reminds me of What We Do in the Shadows, like when they both like angry levitate at one another.
Yeah. I did kind of laugh at that because he's struck his hovering pose, hasn't he? It's like one knee bent 90 degrees and one like toe pointed down to the floor. It did look a bit ridiculous. I thought it was meant to be dramatic, but it's fine. It's a comic book thing.
It would have been our thumbnail, but they're too far apart for it to have fit, which I was actually gutted about. But you had this great moment, again, him discussing, I don't remember anything. I don't remember what I am. What is this, all of this? And then you get the doorbell ring, the first of the two, which is worth mentioning. And you know damn well, at this point in time, I'm assuming it's Quicksilver. However, what led to that more, apparently Evan Peters spoiled it by mistake a couple of months ago, which is ridiculous. When they're discussing earlier about the superheroes, the military guy is like, what's her superhero name? What's her name? Say it. Does she have a stupid name too? And I'm there like, aha, is this a dig at if anyone knows the contractual Quicksilver Scarlet Witch debacle? I'm going to bore with a bit of politics, but I think I messaged this to you, didn't I, Chris? It's when Kevin Feige and team discovered they wanted to put Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in Avengers, Age of Ultron, obviously at the same time I believe they came out 1 year apart from one another. You had X-Men, not Apocalypse, Days of Future Past. And there was rumors that they were prepping a court case. Everyone thought, how can Marvel get away with doing this? And then the story came out that Kevin Feige sat down with lawyers. They studied the contracts of rights to the characters. And it was determined that they would to be able to use the characters, but the trademark and rights of the name Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were with Fox. the rights to the word mutants or X-Men or anything like that was all with Fox. However, they were legally obligated to use their names of Wanda, Pietro, Maximoff. That's why they've always called them Wanda and Pietro.
Mhm.
And when they started harping on the name debacle, I was like, oh, this is a throwback to like 2014. It was a bit too on the nose. So when that doorbell rang, they'd spoken about the brother as well again, which was quite nice. And I guess, I don't know if it's too early to drop it, then we obviously have the revelation of Quicksilver. But because we saw the hair, yeah, we saw the hair. I was like, "Oh, Aaron Taylor Johnson's back," and no, it was Evan Peters, the X-Men Quicksilver.
Do you think that's because they couldn't get Aaron Taylor Johnson back, or he didn't want to come back for it, or do you think this is has Disney been playing 4D chess the whole time?
I think they are. I think Kevin Feige is creative. Maybe not just for this reason, but Kevin Feige. How do I get the X-Men into the MCU via Scarlet Witch? How do I do that? I'll give her own TV show to build to it. And we're going to spend the next year doing multiverse things to emphasize my point. What I'm going to say, which is so important on Twitter, if you look at the audio description of the episode, it finishes with Quicksilver from the X-Men films. That's the official audio description term. So the fact it's self-aware that is the X-Men Quicksilver, not visually, that is him, the character, which is a massive thing. Before we get to more, Carl, did Wanda roll the credits to save the argument? Absolutely. Yeah. She didn't like what she heard, and that's what led us to this moment. And I had goosebumps, I won't lie. I was watching it with a relative, and it was 10 minutes. I was like, we both thought it'd be the brother, but we didn't think it'd be Evan Peters. Mm-hmm. Now, even before we get into even more, Elizabeth Olsen said in an interview this week that because she's a massive Star Wars fan, if anyone's ever seen photos, I think Mark Hamill turned up to the Civil War premiere, and there's photos of her crying when she meets him because she said that she was a Star Wars fan at the age of like 6 or 7. And to be fair, back then it wasn't really a big thing, like as in for like girls and stuff and that age group. So fair play. And then she said this week that there is going to be a cameo in the final episode on the level of Luke and Star Wars. I think we should have a good discussion on that at the end because it's not going to be as big as Luke for obvious reasons. But this is the game-changing moment. This is phase 4. This is phase 4 now. We've got the multiverse and the X-Men. Mic drop. We know we're getting it because of Doctor Strange 2 and Spider-Man, but it is the literal. It's here. It's in physical form. We have witnessed it inside the show.
Yeah, it's when you get that behind shot of him with the silver hair. I did do the intake of breath. I went, now when I saw Luke in Mandalorian, that was like a throwing everything across the room.
Yeah,
like, oh my God, what am I watching right now? This is amazing. This was just like, it's Aaron Taylor Johnson. And then it was like, it wasn't even that. It was just like, remember Days of Future Past? Well, there you go. And I was like, and he was one of my favorite characters from that sort of like new iteration of the X-Men that we got now. We got to talk, unfortunately, about X-Men Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix for a second here, because if we're following that continuity with those films spanned 4 decades, and the actors looked exactly the same. So Quicksilver, Days of Future Past, was obviously set in the 70s. I can forgive First Class into Days of Future Past.
Yeah,
like a 10-year jump.
That was the first one. You had Vietnam. You know, they were meant to be in their early 20s, going to their 30s. They looked that age as well. And the first one's fine. That worked as a bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi in episode 1 to 2. But if 2 to 3 had been another 10 years, then it would have been, hold on, Ewan McGregor, what's going on here? X-Men. Let's have this out.
So Days of Future Past, 70s. You go to Apocalypse, which is then set another 10 years in the future, into the 80s.
The third one's always the worst one in the trilogy, said third film in that trilogy.
and then Dark Phoenix comes along. And actually, I will probably say marginally, Dark Phoenix is slightly better than Apocalypse. I still think Apocalypse is the worst one of those, and we're not even talking about New Mutants. And then Dark Phoenix comes out, and it's set in the 90s. So I think I did some number crunching earlier, and Quicksilver should at least be late 60s, 70 years old at this point. Now, the whole X-Men films is a completely different kettle of fish at this point, because that film series, continuity-wise, pardon my French, is fucked. You cannot connect all of those films. They tried, they had their chance, and then they messed it up with Apocalypse. It's like you had one job, X-Men Apocalypse, so you're in the same series and you messed it up. So I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't even know if they are going to go into that. I think at this point with the X-Men films, it's a bigger mess. It feels like a jumble of cables, and you're there trying to I don't see them doing that. I don't see them doing in this TV show. I don't see them doing that in Phase 4. I think it's just that's a recognizable face. If you know your Marvel films, if you know your comic book films, you know who that is, you know the ramifications of this, just go with it. So maybe down the line, we know that Deadpool's coming into it as well, into the greater MCU at some point. There's heavy rumors, and I imagine they're going to just pay Hugh Jackman whatever the hell he wants, and I'm sure we'll get Wolverine back in some way, shape, or form. Because he just can't keep away from it, can he? As much as he tries with the likes of Logan, they got to keep him coming back. So it's huge. It's huge that we've got the X-Men cast in there. If this is just to set up the multiverse, that's fair enough. I don't want the sort of like first class crowd to be this generation's X-Men. I would rather them do a straight up reboot for in-universe X-Men, if that makes sense. I'm fine with having familiar faces coming back, but I don't know. I think it's time for a fresh reboot of X-Men. Just let the past die with the failure of Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, and let's move on and just create a more comic book accurate iteration of the X-Men.
I'm so torn because I wanted an X-Men reboot. I think I even spoke to you saying like, how sick would Jason Isaacs be as like a middle-aged Magneto? Mm-hmm. Because we've had this discussion before. You know, we've had old Magneto, we've had young Magneto, but we haven't had that middle-aged one, which is the only of the three options they've got left if they want to avoid all obvious comparisons. Mm-hmm. And then I saw today's episode, and I just had this inkling that what if a portal existed within a second of the end credits of Days of Future Past, when the X-Men timeline was reset to make sense, when it had the whole world in its hands. But instead, we got Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. Mm-hmm. It's so tricky because I think in story-wise, the multiverse is going to open a horrible amount of questions. Because I know the concept of the multiverse. I can't tell you what Earth numbers which. Great comment from Life of Brian. If there's a multiverse, they have to be in the same time frame. I don't have an answer for you. These guys are smart. They'll just say, no, we get to pick and choose through time and space, inserts Doctor Who theme. It's so fascinating because I kind of think like a joke meme earlier. It's like when you wait for Tobey Maguire and you get Evan Peters, and it's the Avatar Na'vi lady screaming. I like Evan Peters. I liked the scene in Days of Future Past. I didn't like the one in Apocalypse.
They kept trying to one-up it every single time to the point where it got stupid.
And the problem is in Apocalypse, the CGI looked bad. The whole thing just looked like a badly directed scene. Whereas Days of Future Past, it served a purpose. It was so well done. It wasn't too much, and it was just different. It was groundbreaking compared to it. And I'm sad that I can live with that. He's now the brother. He's in character. He's in he's in her reality as a character. The brother that's far away, that's not been here, and he turns up on the doorstep acting all cool. I don't know what the accent was meant to be.
Yeah, it was like New Yorker kind of accent, wasn't it? It was like a Brooklyn accent or something. Because I was trying to think about it. I was like, okay, so Days of Future Past is the 70s. If we can just pretend just among friends that Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix never happened, which I'm absolutely fine to do in my headcanon, could she have just taken him from that time frame, time travel, and just bring him? So it would have been like early 80s, which this is set in this world, so it would make sense that it'd be roughly the same age.
But what I'm sat here thinking, saying that please bring back James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. Don't let them go out on, I'm going to stand on this hill. Like, they both deserve better than what they ended up with. You don't have to cast the young kids from Apocalypse onwards. They weren't that bad, but we can just pretend it was all Days of Future Past and move on.
Well, aren't we getting Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight? Like, the guy already played Apocalypse. Oh, and then again, I guess Human Torch with Chris Evans and Captain
It doesn't matter, because if it's before Apocalypse, we're all good. We're all good. I think it's a fascinating insight into what could potentially come, but set within the WandaVision story, this big tease, I don't know who it's going to... I'm going to be not disappointed if it's Benedict Cumberbatch. That sounds like entitlement. We know she's going to be in the next... She's going to be in Doctor Strange 2. We know that's set in a multiverse. We know that Spider-Man's going to use the multiverse, and we know that they're using the multiverse now. So if Doctor Strange rocks up in the final episode, we only had this kind of small chat earlier, and I just kind of said that because the MCU is so current, there are so many films, we see characters rock up in so many other films. Benedict Cumberbatch turning up for a TV show isn't that big a deal. He rocked Thor, for God's sake, for 10 minutes. And I like him, and that's just the ultimate credit scene of him turning up to help. But if Magneto rocked up, it doesn't matter which one, because obviously he's technically the father in the comics or the X-Men version, whatever you want to use. There's an interesting place, but to say that there's going to be a cameo in the final episode that's as big as Luke, I don't think anything will be as big as Luke, for the fact that we hadn't seen 1983 Luke Skywalker since 1983, whereas we've seen the entire MCU cast over the last 11 years 3 times a year. So it's a bit hard to compare. Sorry, what I'm going to do is bring up a comment again. Who brought him? It wasn't Wanda. Now, this is a really good discussion to have. Sorry, Chris, I'm about to cut you off.
No, that's all right.
She hints in that final scene at not creating this world, that she woke up and she was in it. Now, Mephisto, I think is the name, or I can't remember already.
Yeah, Mephisto's like Satan, basically, isn't he?
That's the name everyone's been throwing around since day one. We had the discussion, everyone's talking, and we all think Agnes, the neighbor, is far more involved. But the fact that she isn't the lead of this, she's not running the show. She's running most of the show, but she didn't set that show up. There's always a bigger fish, and in this case, I think it's her next. If it's not the neighbor knows something, but there is someone higher and there is someone bigger. And I think that person is going to be the one that opens the universe to Wanda, or gets Wanda to open the multiverse for her.
Well, I mean, Mephisto is basically as cosmic as you get, because he basically is Lucifer. He is Satan. As far as I know, I don't know much about him. As I mentioned, like, I know that he ties into the Spider-Man story as well. I'm sure with comic books, he ties into everyone's story with how comic books are. But I know there was another villain mentioned, and I think we mentioned that in episode 1. There was like a shape of his helmet or something was on one of the title sequences. I can't remember the name of that character, but I know that in the comics he has some kind of ties to Vision's origin story, but because they've completely changed Vision's origin story from what it is in the comics, I don't know if they can do that, or if they can modernize that or change it however they need to. Yeah, so I'm still close. I think it would be good to... I'm kind of torn, because I quite like the idea that Wanda is controlling all of this herself, and this is all a way, like a coping strategy, because I think that's a really, really depressing and interesting look into the character, and is kind of a believable way where after she's dealt with Thanos and everything that happened after Endgame, and then reality starts to sink and people go back to normal lives, what is her normal life after that point? And then this would naturally be where she'd go mentally. So I quite like that. But then I also get that it is a comic book series, and it is still very much that, you know, good guy versus bad guy, evil bad guy, mastermind controlling everything. So I think I'd be fine with either, but they've got to pull something out of the bag. If it's just the next door neighbor is just like an evil woman, you know, like Guy Pearce at the end of Iron Man 3. And I know this is like a big debate between people. You have the Mandarin, Ben Kingsley, as you want him, as the comic, like a modern retelling of the comic book. And then you just have Guy Pearce, a dude, at the end. I am the Mandarin. If it turns out at the end, it's just like the next door neighbor, she's just stood there like, I am Mephisto. I'm like, no, you're not. Mephisto literally looks like Satan and is red and has horns and is the devil, basically. So I don't know how I want them to do it, because I quite like this more. I won't say against the grain, because it is still like a comic book thing. But I mentioned like the Wonder Woman comparison. I don't want necessarily like a slanging match between.
I wish to open the multiverse.
You have to renounce your wish, Wanda. Renounce it so that the world can live. I don't know. I don't necessarily want it to turn into like a gigantic punch 'em up between good guy and bad guy at the end, because I like to think that this series is a little bit above that and is slightly different to what we've seen before.
Definitely. And I think there's some more stuff going on. I think Mephisto is going to be the big bad, but I don't know if it's going to be hidden or if there's going to be something else happening. Got another comment from Dave, who's on it tonight. I think it was offered to her by the real big bad. Another theory just come up in my head. What if this villain wants to, rather than this Ultron theory, what if there's some legitimacy to it, where the villain might want Vision's body to be able to eventually use for themselves? Could be anything. There's so much that could happen, and I think will happen, that, you know, we're 5 episodes in, and this has not gone in any way I imagined or thought of it. Episode 2 and 3, they shattered most people's theories and stuff like this. I think there's a direction they're heading in, and I think next week it's about to get bonkers, and I reckon they're going to do the first 15 minutes in sort of sitcom mode, because even I think Darcy's character, did she say they've recast him? Like, was
yes,
comment like that as well, and I love that kind of thing, and because if they don't know who, because if she says they've recast him, she doesn't know that's Quicksilver from elsewhere. That's, she's just got someone to play her brother. But the reality is going to be this guy is going to be fighting or running quickly, then they're going to quickly realize, hold on, this is the exact same power as what her brother did have, but it's done differently. So I think this is the beginning of well, it's the beginning of the multiverse, but I think in the wider spectrum, the multiverse, we've all kind of assumed it's going to be phase 4. Everyone said from a logistical standpoint, if the Fantastic Four rocked up tomorrow in the MCU, said, hey, we've just bought this building, which has been the rumor for a while that they're going to buy the Avengers Tower, which is why they were leaving it in Spider-Man to become the Baxter Building. If they just rock up and it's like, we're like this really famous family of scientists and we just weren't mentioned for a couple of phases. It's like, okay, do we hit the multiverse button? I don't know. And X-Men's the obvious one. It's you can't introduce the mutant race in the current state of the MCU. It's far too risky. It's still risky. I think if anyone can pull this off, it is Kevin Feige now, because it's more his track record. He just does things people don't think anyone... I'm not saying anyone's doubting him, but if anyone's always able to prove the doubters wrong that they can do it, it has been him more often than not. He's always made sure he's had the right talent on board at the right time to work with it, to make it work, had the right planning in place, all that stuff. If anyone can... And also, let's track back to when Disney bought Fox. That first hit public domain at the end of 2017, it might have been like Star Wars. They might have been planning to buy them for a year in advance for that. You don't just offer a bid overnight. There's so much more to it. So he might have been planning this for 3-4 years. How am I going to introduce the X-Men to the MCU? How? And I think he's someone that's had enough time, and he's probably got enough of a, not backbone, he's got enough, well, I mean, he is Marvel, but it's not something Disney are going to pressure him into. Disney are going to say, listen, we bought the X-Men, do what you want to do with it. It's just up to you. That's probably exactly what the
go make it work, go make it happen kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think this is how he's going to do it, and I've got no idea what's going to play out next. Are they going to recast some people? Or are we going to get new iterations? And as Dave mentioned earlier, are we going to get different points in time for these multiverse years? Is someone going to go back to a different year to take a different character? Because could you take the 2004 where Spider-Man 2 is set? Can you put 2004 and pretend it was 2020? Absolutely not. So it's going to be really interesting to see how and why that character's been picked. And I think in terms of the MCU, this is going to be game-changing. And there are two multiverses happening. The other is called The Flash. Now, if you're a DC fan, sorry to bring you reality, The Flash is being used to reset a universe that has failed.
Yeah.
That is the concept, and that's not me taking the piss or anything. The DCEU hasn't hit the heights it should have, or people wanted it to. Financially, critically acclaimed with fans. Stop pretending the cultists are a part of it, or they're not. And they've hit that reset button of the multiverse, whereas Marvel is the complete other end. They've hit the multiverse button because they've kind of peaked with everything they already have. Now it's time for them to grow somehow even more. And I think that's where this WandaVision series is heading. It's heading into this unknown fact that we've not just got a fantastic story unfolding set within this show, the story of Wanda and Vision. We've also now got a bigger story, which is going to maybe show its hand over the next 3 or 4 years. But the Wanda stuff, I think, in all honesty, them switching WandaVision with Falcon and Winter Soldier is without a doubt the best way to kick off Phase 4, I think.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, all the shows are going to be completely different anyway and sort of like inclusive too. But I think definitely for the story, and we know that we've mentioned before that Wanda's going to appear in Doctor Strange 2. That's dealing with all the cosmic stuff. So it's kind of necessary to get people thinking about it now before that film even comes out. So if they have watched this show, they can be ticking it over and sort of like mulling it over before they get the big in-universe, in-film drop of the multiverse. And then I think that'll double down when we get to the likes of Spider-Man, where we see, and people who have known these Spider-Man characters actually get to see them all together on the screen at the same time. So, I mean, ultimately what Disney can do at the moment, and with Kevin Feige and everything, it's the ultimate retcon. You have all of these films and series and reboots of countless comic book things before. You've got Fantastic Four, which was made and then rebooted and then failed. You've got, X amount of Spider-Man films. They tend to reboot that every single time. Even with Incredible Hulk, we've essentially kind of almost had 3 Incredible Hulks in a very short time period as well. But what it's given them the opportunity to do now with some creative writing and a kind of, oh yeah, we had this thing planned out the whole time, is to go back and retcon some of those things. So now maybe we will see flashbacks to Days of Future Past and, lines where, oh, my mum knew a guy who could move metal and he had a little sister in that with red hair, and maybe they can do something with that. So it's ultimately going with the whole thing of, oh yeah, this was all part of the plan the whole time, like the multiverse, to tie all these different studios things back into it. It was all part of the plan since the beginning, and that's not the case. We know that's not the case. It's just, as you're watching it in context, it was just different film studios had different rights to characters. Some made excellent films, the Raimi trilogy. Some made terrible films with a lot of Marvel films. So it's going to take a lot of writing, and I think the X-Men are the hardest ones to do. I think Fantastic Four, you could bring it in. You could do something easily like, with all of this cosmic stuff going, we needed to send space explorers up. Like, we've recruited a team of 4 people to go and check out some weird thing that's going on in space, and then boom, you've got your Fantastic Four. You can bring them in. But X-Men is people born with natural abilities and a school and a thing that's been pre-established. Unless you go the route of they're just building this school now in present day and all of a sudden they're new, but again, mutants would have been around for a while. So that is the one thing that's going to be the tough thing to do. But just to see the cameo with Evan Peters at the end, I thought that was great. And if that is indeed going to continue into next episode, I assume it would have to. I think it'd be weird if they just cut that off and it went in a completely different direction, because she's essentially got her brother back now at this point. He has been recasted, but he's filling that emotional void that was left after his death in Age of Ultron. So I'm really excited. We've got a lot of love for people for Kat Dennings in the comments right now as well. I've just seen Carl. Kat Dennings is starting to grow on me. Like for Brian, I love Darcy. It's because there's still some humor in there. There's still a little bit of comic relief, but it's not completely on the nose as much as it was in the Thor films. Like, that was her sole role in those first few Thor films, was you are the comic relief. You've got to say the stupid line. And she never felt like a scientist to me at any point. She kept flashing around these credentials. And I'm like, there is no way a person like this would be a scientist, a professional scientist in this way. But I'm getting slightly more of that side of her in this. She's a little bit more restrained now in this, which I think is the best thing to do with a character.
And I think with her earlier, when they were discussing superheroes, I was like, oh, is she going to drop, oh, I'm best friends with Thor? Do you know what I mean? And I was like, are they going to get that in there? Not that they hired her for that, but I think there's more of a place in her being, I mean, I know that Wanda's obviously got powers, but taking her into that fantasy Thor-like world versus here is reality in America with scientists on a mission to discover what's going on here. That makes far more sense. And I think also because it's not a film, it's TV, she's not forced to follow. Like I said, it's the comedy act. She's forced to follow them around and go on the quest with them. Whereas in this, she doesn't turn up in episode 1. She doesn't have to be there from the get-go. She's being used the way they needed to be used. And I think the same is to be said for Monica Rambeau. And I always forget his name, the FBI agent. All I can think of is Kim Jong-un from the interview, which I always feel bad for. But is it Jerry? Is it Jerry something?
Let me have a look. Oh, God, is he the main cast list? So the actors Randall Jimmy Woo is the character.
Okay. And that's the thing, they've all got a place. And again, getting those scenes in the reality side, because if you take them out of it, we're just getting a really boring military have surrounded the area. Scarlet Witch is about to turn evil. Whereas when we bring in these characters we know that we like, that we've interacted with, I think it's making a big difference. And I think that's also for Wanda's point of view, is that she knows that Monica's not a bad person. She's just maybe asked too far about Ultron or whatnot. She got kicked out, but she didn't want to hurt her. That's why she dropped her. She could have killed her. She didn't. She just wanted her out of reality. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how it unfolds, because is it going to get to that corruption of morality where, yes, you took all these people hostage. Yes, you don't want to hurt them, but you still tampered with them and used them to the way you wanted them to be used. And there's just so much that's going to go on for the next few weeks. It's just really enjoyable. And again, I just didn't think we'd have this in WandaVision. I thought it'd be fine. I had trust in Marvel, but I didn't expect it to be as good as it has become. yes, we're past the halfway point that it could go wrong, but it could somehow get even better, and we don't know that until the next few weeks unfold. What I will say, and I've already forgotten it. Ignore that. I had a really good point a minute ago in my head.
It might come back to you. I'm just going to bring this up real quick because it's the last point. It's the last comment that we've got from Carl. It's, will we see Wanda versus Vision at the end of the season? That could be pretty cool. The one thing that I'm kind of worried about, because we have technically seen Vision die twice, if they try and do like a final goodbye and they do the same thing again, like I will always love you, Wanda, but you have to let me go. You're basically just doing exactly the same thing as Infinity War, and I think it will cheapen that moment from Infinity War, which is my biggest fear if they do that. And also, I don't think there'll be much emotional resonance with it this time, because it's like, well, as a viewer, we know he's dead. We've seen this a bunch of times, and now you're repeating it for a third time. It's going to have no impact. So I hope they skirt around that in a different way and they don't play it exactly the same. But at this point, I really don't know what they can do in terms of that.
They wouldn't do it because it's too dark, but I think Vision is going to find out he died. I think that's going to be a really big point. Maybe episode 8, 7, or 8, we're going to get that. But I would just love, as I said, it's a bit morbid, it's a bit depressing, but I would just love for her to wake up in the middle of the night. Not he's hung himself or anything like that, but you could just imagine him like just sat on the sofa. She doesn't know what's going on, and it's grey Vision with a blob missing from his head. Something that dark, bleak, and depressing. It's not the same goodbye we had in Infinity War. It's not him being murdered, which we had in Infinity War. It's him going out on his own exact terms and bringing her back to reality. I would love something like that, but I don't know if that's a bit too dark and depressing for Marvel. But
well, let's go in that direction. Take some chances, like go for it.
That's what I'm hoping for. Again, I can't think what I was going to say. It's going to get me absolutely fuming because I know as soon as we hit end broadcast, it's going to come back to me. But no, I mean, kind of, I don't know if we've got anything else to say, but wrapping up.
Yeah.
Once again, I'm talking about WandaVision. I'm saying I'm still intrigued. I kind of know what's going on, but I'm having a great time watching it. But today, more than anything, the fact that we've got that official confirmation that the multiverse, it's like the Yoda meme, like begun the multiverse has. I thought it was a solid episode. And again, we're now waiting next week very patiently. We're getting that discussion. We're reading the theories online. Anything could happen. And I think they just got it right. And the performances, once again, I mean, both Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany have been fantastic in every episode, but as a duo, they're great. But really, I kind of hinted earlier, if Marvel don't push these for Emmy nominations for this year, that'd be so disappointing. Because for a mini-series, which gets its own category, where it doesn't have to be tied into big things, Paul Bettany is superb. Even if he's in human mode or robot modes, he's fantastic. And he's been able to really showcase the acting skills he's not had the chance to do in previous Marvel films.
He's good. I don't know if he's Emmy worthy. I'd have to see a little bit more and see who he's up against. I think out of the two, Elizabeth Olsen probably gets more emotional range, but that's just within her character because it is essentially her story. They're both good. I don't know if they're sort of like Emmy standards at the moment, but I'm sure when we get towards the end and we get hopefully we get like a big emotional payoff towards the end, we'll probably see more of that acting side to them both. If I'm going to give my overall opinions on the episode, I'm kind of torn if it's my favorite episode. It probably is my favorite episode, I think, inherently just because I felt like the sitcom storyline tied more intrinsically into the themes of the characters and what's going on with the outside world. I love those. I've always loved it, but especially in this episode, the glitches and the breakdowns in character, that the fourth wall moments were really unsettling, and I'm enjoying seeing Vision sort of come to terms of, well, not come to terms, he's still trying to discover it, but becoming more aware that something's not right and that he can't remember his past. And I thought that was executed really well. And just as a series overall at the moment, I was worried about it being 9 episodes and if it could sustain that. But I think the thing that is propelling it week to week and is proving to me and is still bringing me back is the mystery, is the intrigue. And I do think as a mystery, as a fan of the Marvel films, that is the thing chief among them that is the propelling force that's bringing me back each week, is that I want answers. And, it's holding back on some, it's giving some away, and then it throws you for a complete loop at the end by bringing Quicksilver into it. So I'm having a really good time with the series. It's definitely one that's grown on me week to week. I just hope that they pay it off well. That's the big thing now. It's like, you've got me intrigued. Just nail this ending. Don't be like all of the TV shows where they mess the ending up or something at the end. Please just like knock it out of the park. But yeah, and there's plenty still more that we don't know. And that's the best thing about it, is that week to week, there's still so much more we don't know. And we've got 4 episodes left, so we've still got a good chunk of time to go at the moment, like at least another 2 hours of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing. We've still got 4 episodes, 4 more weeks, and in 4 weeks' time, when we're having this conversation, it's going to be completely different. The puzzle will have been solved. It will have all clicked, we think, we hope. And I'm excited to see where it goes from that. Now, in 4 weeks' time, many things will be very different because we've got a lot of content coming out. Look at that for a breakaway comment. As usual, we're actually going to do something a bit different. There's too many videos coming up. We've got a lot of videos coming out over the next week. So, News of the World review coming tomorrow. Beverly Hills Cop retro review is coming this Tuesday. That will be pre-recorded. We've got a Judas and the Black Messiah review coming this Wednesday. And next Thursday, we have our 1000th video. That is a very strange statistic. And it was scheduled in very specifically because it had to be the 1000th video. And we've had some other videos crop up before then. So do come back to us. If you like the channel, if you like what you're watching, then do share, do subscribe it. But we want to know your thoughts on WandaVision. We do reply to all the comments. We had a lot of people talking about Heat this week, which was great fun because that was a phenomenal film. So I'm going to tell you what to go back and look at our Heat review. And if you've not seen Heat, just go and watch it. It's the weekend now. You've got no excuse. But do comment your WandaVision thoughts. And as we always say, the best way to find our videos, to find out what we're going to be doing, when we're going to be doing it, is on Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. Now, in our 1000th video, you may have also seen another series tease on social media earlier this week. Again, get us on social media. We're going to be unveiling a new series coming to the channel. Is it snobby to say it's a mini-series?
It's a mini-series, kind of, yeah.
So next Thursday, 1000th video. We haven't finalized what we're going to do yet. It's going to be pretty chill. We'll have more details, but inside of that video, we will also announce a new series. We'll probably have a discussion on it, but us two are both deep on behind the scenes organizing some stuff for it. So do check that out, even on the off chance you don't care. It's a 1000th video. There's going to be a big announcement. And to end this, there is going to be a gargantuan, I'm dropping the gargantuan word, announcement for a series happening across March and April at the end of this month. Some people may be knowing what that's about. Some might not. And I'll let you figure it out. And maybe each week I'll do a cryptic tease. Hey,
like WandaVision.
I'm going to say no. Yeah, we're live. Let's have this discussion. We're going to announce it. Oh no, it won't be able to do the final WandaVision video. Around the time of the final WandaVision video is going to be announced. But we will make a cryptic tease every week until then.
And we're not bringing in like a cameo from like a famous actor or anything, but it is going to be good. It's going to be amazing. It's a massive series, as George just teased. But yeah, George has just done all the announcements, so I'm not going to go over those again. But I do want to say a big thank you to Carl and The Life of Brian in the comments with us every single week, commenting along and getting the conversation going. We do appreciate you guys. So thanks for jumping on. And yeah, among all those videos, if you are just here to watch our WandaVision videos, you can find us again next week at 8 p.m. For another discussion on episode 6 of WandaVision, and we'll see what's in store for us next week. So until then, we'll see you guys next time. Take care.